Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova. There is a famous Hasidic story about a rabbi named Zusia. Fun to say and fun to tell. And when Rabbi Zusia, who was a very great rabbi of his community, and he taught, and he prayed, and he visited people who were sick. When he was on his deathbed, his students came in to help him and found that he was crying. He was distraught and he was in tears. And they said to him, Rav Zusia, are you crying because you have not been as wise as Moses? Are you crying because you were not as brave as Esther? Are you crying because you were not as kind and hospitable as Abraham? Are you crying because you were not as cunning as Rebekah? And Rav Zusia looked at each and every one of his students in the eye, and through his tears, he said, no, I am not crying because I was not wise as Moses, or brave as Esther, or kind as Abraham, or cunning as Rebekah. I am crying because when I do finally pass from this world and appear before God in heaven, they will not ask me, Rav Zusia, why weren't you as wise as Moses and as kind as Abraham? They will ask me, Rav Zusia, why were you not more Rav Zusia? Why didn't I fulfill my potential, my unique path that could have been mine? Now that story speaks very much to this idea of recognizing and lifting our spiritual selves, our sense of soul, our unique individual character. And that is where we are on this fourth week of Elul. This idea of finding the inside, finding the essence of who we are by reaching for our spiritual selves. As many of you know, throughout this month, we have been walking toward this moment. We have been moving through a progression, examining our communal selves, our interpersonal selves, our physical selves, and now finally, our spiritual selves. We have been moving from the outside to the inside, from the public to the personal, from the social to the spiritual. And now, at this moment, on this last Shabbat of 5784, how do we find the focus to push ourselves forward and focus on the best and truest part? Now, I have to confess, because it's the season of confessing, that this notion of focusing on my spiritual self has been pretty hard for me this week, and maybe this entire season. To really embrace the project of Cheshbon HaNefesh like I usually do and have done in previous years, because I keep thinking, how can we talk about our spiritual selves when the world is literally on fire? How can we seek absolution and emotional resolution when we know that so many people all around us are in terrible pain and suffering? Just this week, here in the United States, we are watching a devastating hurricane tear through Florida and the southeast, and the pictures are horrific. In Israel, we are dealing with war newly ignited in Lebanon, continued war in Gaza, both of which come with casualty tragedies on every side, and hostages still hang in the balance. And as I spoke to some of my colleagues across the country and in Israel this week, in our usual round of High Holy Day preparations, so many of them are reflecting, does slichut even matter this year? Can we even put our brains to that project? Can we approach spiritual seeking with any kind of seriousness? In Hebrew, the etymology of the word salach or slicha, the root of where it comes from, has a connection to the idea of washing away, feeling clean. Can we really feel that this year, even after 25 hours of Yom Kippur? Now, when we feel awash in darkness, it is hard to figure out how we find that spiritual self, how we create that idea of spiritual connection. And so as I was thinking about how to even talk about searching for spiritual self, I turned to a text that says a lot about spirituality, and that is the text of the Zohar. And the Zohar is a text of Jewish mysticism written in medieval Spain and usually fairly controversially attributed to a 2nd century sage. Now, the Zohar asks in a very famous story right toward the beginning, what is a spiritual person? There is a rabbi, Rav Chia, who's wandering around in heaven and is yelling as loud as he can, show me, God, what is this spirituality that we talk about? What is it? And this is how the voice answers Rav Chia. The voice says, who are spiritual people? It is people who can turn darkness into light, turn bitter into sweet, and awaken to the light before dawn. So what does this teach us? This teaches us that you have to encounter the darkness before you reach for the light. You have to encounter the bitter before you turn it into the sweet. You have to find and confront and face and feel the darkness. You have to be willing to know it before you can even decide that you're willing to try to reach for the light, to reach for the sweet. Awakening to the light before dawn, you have to try to find it. Once you have known the darkness, you have to go looking for the light. You cannot wait for it to find you. You have to wake up in the morning before the sunrise in order to see the sunrise. You cannot hope that you will magically sleep until whenever you want and see the miraculous sunrise. You have to want it. You have to go find it. Now, once you are in that dark, how does the Zohar and the mystics suggest that you then grow your spirituality in even order to find that light? They say, reach for the interconnection. And that is how you walk toward the light. Talk about what you are feeling in your darkness as much as you can. Experience the world as much as you can. Reach out to other people as much as you can. Even though in the Jewish tradition, sometimes we imagine that in order to be spiritual and feel mysticism, you separate from others and you go all alone to a place and find spirituality in isolation, the Zohar actually says at the beginning that is not true. If you really want to cultivate your spirituality and find your soul, you have to go find other people who want to do the same thing. You have to find it with others. And this is where we really come full circle and back to the beginning. Because how do we find and focus our spiritual selves and souls? We have to find our community. We have to cultivate our communal selves. You have to find the group of people who will be with you on this project. How do you find your spiritual self? You have to repair the interpersonal relationships with the people you know help you be your unique best self. How do you find your spiritual self? You have to take care of your body so that you have the energy to pursue this process. Even though we walk through these weeks of Elul and talk about 4 separate selves, we don't compartmentalize these selves. They are not by themselves selves. They overlap and reinforce one another. They have to, because we are not 4 separate people inside. We are one whole soul. And so with that in mind, we are going to turn to our questions. These questions that help us find our spiritual selves for the week. Now, in our email that we sent out, there are 7. I'm going to lift 3 as we walk between today and Rosh Hashanah on Wednesday. As we seek our spiritual self, we say, how often do I take the time to focus on my awareness of the beauty and holiness of the world around me and those with whom I share it? How often during the past year have I been able to set aside my own needs for something bigger than myself? When was the last time that I prayed and felt close to God? These moments of darkness that we are all walking through right now, they are hard. And looking inside for our own strength so that we can reach out to the world with spiritual depth is hard. But we must go seeking. We must try to find this sense of interconnection. We must work to find it. As we enter these high days, we must be brave enough to awake before the dawn in anticipation of the light. Shabbat shalom.